The next morning, Prince Russell and his unit returned to Westover, having ridden through the night to finish their duties and make it back. The warning of their announcement came just after breakfast, while Dominic and the others were verifying the details of the day's work orders with the staff, but before the actual negotiations and inevitable arguments about the manor's future layout could begin. That was the only part that the other two princes were concerned about, as they were the ones who would be assigned to the location for the duration of the negotiations. If they were provided the opportunity to make a meeting location feel more like home, there was no way that they would pass it up, and Dominic suspected that Prince Russell would be very much the same once he finally made it to the manor. However, that was not the first thing on the Signia prince's mind when he arrived. "Duke Dominic, a moment of your time, if you will. Gentlemen, I will join you shortly," he announced the moment he entered the room. Prince Russell didn't stop. He went straight to the office with Dominic behind him, and locked the door once they were inside. "I have an update for you. We did not find any more mages. However, we did find many signs of them. There are camps that were clearly human-made, not monster, though they are occupied by monster armies now. Or were when we arrived. The duchy is crawling with monsters of every sort but trolls. Those all appear to have broken their restraints when the mages left and gathered in a single village a day's journey away, as you had informed us. Still, the sheer number of monsters that we encountered is far beyond what we are able to handle. 1,000 men, even if they were the royal rifles, would not be enough for some of the armies of monsters loose within Stantia province." The prince's words came out in a rush, as if he feared that he would lose his nerve if he stopped speaking. "How are your men?" Dominic asked, more concerned about casualties. "Mostly intact. We lost a little over 100 reservists during a particularly heated engagement with a group of venomclaw crabs. Nasty things and hard as steel. I brought back the materials for the craftsmen, hoping that they could make something for my officers in commemoration of the fight. It's the largest set of casualties that we've seen since the war started. In all, we lost 160 men, including 5 noble officers. It's a loss, but one that was within the known risks when we went out." Prince Russell explained. 15% on a single outing was a heavy casualty rate, especially for men that were looking forward to simply finishing up their assignment and going home. But that was also likely to be the cause of the losses. The men were already looking forward to what they would do when they got home, and weren't as guarded as they could have been. Dominic had faced the venomclaw crabs before, and while they were nasty, against an army of spearmen, they shouldn't have been such a major threat. They were considered a level 5 monster, as tough as a hobgoblin, but that was mostly on their durability, as they were incapable of using weapons like a hobgoblin could. They also weren't particularly intelligent. Or edible. In that case, let's get your men settled in the barracks, and they can stay on wall duty until it's time to go home. Let them rest up and help the construction team renovate the manor. The other princes have some requests on how things should be upgraded, since we're doing a renovation anyhow. Dominic suggested. Prince Russell nodded. "Do you know who is coming for Signia? As the envoy, that is." Dominic shrugged. "I haven't received any word, and at this point, I'm beginning to fear that it's going to turn out to be Princess Alexis, while I'm left to run the house." Prince Russell laughed. "Well, there is no fear of that, at the very least. As the older brother, I outrank her. So, if there is no official announcement, it becomes my duty, and she gets to organize the events while you run the duchy." Dominic smiled. "That's wonderful news. I am told that the arrival of Prince George triggered the Axbridge royalty to send their men early. That's why everyone is here well before they were supposed to be. I would assume that the royal delegation was supposed to arrive after the infrastructure teams had finished their work, not before they had even started. But there isn't much that we can do about it now. They're working all over town, preparing us for an influx of residents, as well as the extra buildings for the officers. Once those are done, I will see what I can get out of them before they are redeployed." The prince chuckled and shook his head. "They'll run away faster than even my own men. If they're not already assigned a new task, they will be. Once the rain starts, their job gets busy." "That's a good point. We should have them shore up the river banks as well. They look pretty sturdy, but you can never be too safe." Dominic agreed. Prince Russell shook his head. You can only keep assigning them tasks for so long. The king has an immense amount of work for them to do after the war, and multiple cities need rebuilt. The fact that you got priority for a team is already astonishing. I had expected them to start with Castle City so that they could start to deal with the refugee issue. You know, I never thought of it that way. I just accepted that they were here because they were needed, but were certainly not at the top of the list of people with issues. Even if we didn't expand the manor, we could make do and just let the visitors post extra guards to mark their territory. Prince Russell sighed as he looked out the window of the office. Nothing about this situation strikes me as normal. We're missing something here, and it's got to be deeper than the surface politics. Dominic frowned. I barely understand that much. I get that everyone is concerned about what is going on in Dagos, and with the Skipple Academy's missing members. But I don't even know the names of half the people involved. Prince Russell shrugged. Well, you'll learn them sooner or later. You're in a bit of an odd position. Most of the senior nobles of the region grew up together. We either went to school together or we met regularly at holidays. Our parents know each other, our businesses work together. None of that is true for you, and now you're here in the middle of nowhere, and you don't even get a regular mail service delivery. Dominic blinked slowly. There is a regular mail service? How did you think that we all communicated? Dominic smirked at the prince. I just assumed that you used a magical communication token. Like, every noble should have a whole stack of them for their friends or something. Do you have any idea how expensive that would be? No need to answer that. The royals all have a few of them, but magical communication tokens are specific to the receiver, and somewhat rare. If you make it that far in your Magitech engineering course, perhaps you'll learn to make them. Prince Russell suggested. Except that most of the ones I have seen are the work of techno-witches. They only work because of witchcraft. That's not something I can replicate with Magitech. Perhaps with a spell if I met the right archmage. Oh, that reminds me. I need to talk to the second prince. He promised me he'd help with the materia gem creation spell so I can make spell gems. I suppose that I could likely ask one of the other mages, but he's an excellent teacher. He taught me to make mana crystals in only a few hours. Dominic replied. Prince Russell just nodded in acceptance. He wasn't a mage and he had no idea whether that was fast or not. It did sound like a reasonably short period of time to learn a new skill, but little about mages made sense. Well, second brother certainly can make them. He's the one that made all of mine, and I can ask him to send you a copy of the relevant learning materials. They might take a while, as the mage towers are quite particular about who gets to learn what. It's an elitist thing. They don't want commoner mages running around with highly valuable spells, spilling trade secrets for bowls of soup. Prince Russell replied. Dominic chuckled, and the prince looked a bit abashed. You get what I mean. Mages hold a high position in society, but if just anyone had access to the knowledge that they have hoarded, they would lose most of it and face demands for anything and everything, like common tradesmen. He added. Dominic nodded. Oh, I understand quite well. I found the same thing once I started working with Pops. The moment that others realize you have a skill that can benefit them, they often become truly shameless in their requests. The first day that I worked with the old man, there was a mage in the shop demanding that he make a dimensional compass to order on a single day's timeline. Quite unreasonable. How have you been sending messages to get what you need so far? Prince Russell asked. The Merchants Guild. The Castellan is a member, and we get regular visits, usually twice per week. Dominic explained. The prince frowned. They come twice a week down this route? How incredibly odd. There isn't even a good road. Dominic smirked. It's an old trade route from before the road's insignia began to get developed. But soon we will have a road. I've been working on a road building machine, and with a few more tweaks, I think that we can increase the speed the infrastructure teams build new roadways by more than triple. Prince Russell nodded. If they make you a road back to Limpsbury, it would be spectacular for trade. I suspect that there will be discussion about using the river as a trade route as well. Barges are better suited to bulk cargo than airships, and from Westover they have a clear route with no shallows or rapids all the way to the ocean. If there was a road here from Limpsbury, Bulk goods could travel on major highways all the way from Kynwyn, or with Eton in Axbridge. Then, they could transfer goods to barges to go to Signia City without taking the highway through Dagos. Kynwyn was technically still in Dagos' control, but Dominic suspected that it would not be for much longer, with Axbridge here holding political meetings. Goods could also go the other way, from with Eton south to Wistfield, then Coster to get them onto the river. But that would still pass the goods through Westover on their way. Both major cities needed the trade, now that they were cut off from Kynwyn by politics and a civil war. Without the ability to move their goods, they would be in serious financial trouble. I will ask them what direction they're going. At the very least, we might be able to get them to build a road to whatever highway they reach next after they finish here. But that's a bit of a secondary issue with the number of monsters that you found. I am hoping that our messages to the Adventurers Guild get a response soon. We're going to need the assistance, and I strongly suspect that there are rules about asking the gathered armies to go hunt monsters for us. Dominic joked. Prince Russell laughed. There are. But I would love to see the look on their faces when you asked. The next week passed in a whirlwind of chaos. The princes had managed to finalize their requests for the new buildings on the first afternoon, and somehow, the design requests hadn't even gotten any major objections from the engineer or the household staff. That had let them get started the next morning, and the manor was very close to becoming a 5-building complex around a large central garden. There was a fancy new fountain in the garden, mostly decorative, but it did have a large cistern under it, so it could be used as emergency water reserves for the manor, should the wells be compromised. The final part of the puzzle was the defensive fortification enhancements, which should allow them to call the manor properly suited as a fortified residence. The decision from Alexis had been to make it into a star fort with rounded walls, so cannon fire wouldn't easily get a direct hit. They would also have enchantments placed on them by the gentlemen of the Purity sect, and the wall would be backed up by piled rocks all the way to the inner wall ring, then topped with earth, so they could plant gardens on the slopes. That was Millie's idea. At first, Alexis had objected, as the walls were a defensive structure, not a garden. But Prince Fahad had supported Dominic's assertion that it would be brilliant psychological warfare to send soldiers out for fresh veggies during a siege. So, there would be designated pathways to the outer battlements, but the majority of the upper level would be converted to food, with 4 towers to help them spot threats in the distance. The manor wasn't the only spot in town that had received major upgrades, though. The whole village was beginning to look like a small city as the teams rebuilt the old houses, and then expanded the housing options with long, narrow villas and a few more apartment blocks. Once the convention center had been finished, the team working on it had moved to building roads around town, and they had become great fans of the simple roadwork machine that Westover had been using. They had commissioned 2 more of them, along with tractors to pull them. That meant they weren't going to be leaving in airships, but that wasn't surprising. There was too much work for them to be hopping around between cities with minimal equipment. Dominic was sitting on the bedroom balcony, watching the work progress when a maid silently approached from his left. "Do you have a message or a request?" Dominic asked, not looking back. After spending time around them, he could tell who was who by their magic, and this was one of the girls of the Purity sect. Definitely one of their own and not a threat. "A message, I think," she replied quietly. That got Dominic's attention, and he stopped channeling mana into his spell book to focus on her. "All right, that sounds interesting. What do you have for me?" "We detected mages approaching. The sect always had a scry for danger 3 times a day, and we continued the practice here. The mages don't appear to be a direct threat, they just have the potential to be dangerous because of their skills. Here, this is the vision that we saw," she replied, speaking softly enough that her voice wouldn't carry away from the balcony. With a surge of mana, a short vision appeared on the surface of the metal tray that had carried Dominic's snacks. What it showed was a group of people, young and old, in tattered mage robes, following a floating stick through the woods. "What's with the stick?" Dominic asked. "They're also scrying, but not for a vision. They're using the stick to guide them to something." Dominic stared at the final moment of the image, then nodded. "To us, presumably, or your vision wouldn't have detected them. Do you recognize the robes?" The maid shook her head. "No, my lord, but while they're designed as mage robes with a hood, I believe that they're made for practicality and not fashion. Did you see the waist wraps? Dominic nodded. Common enough in the deserts of Axbridge. They keep the sand from blowing up your clothes and give you somewhere to store stuff. Exactly. I don't know of any mage tower or sect that wears such a practical outfit. Those are traveling robes, most likely for a nomadic tribe of magic users. The fact that they keep their heads covered even in the woods suggests they're most likely not humans. She agreed. Then it's almost guaranteed that they are coming for us. I was warned by Prince Fahad that word of our little duchy has gotten around to the nomads, and some are looking for somewhere to settle. There aren't a lot of places that a demi-human can go to make a living and not end up getting chased by guards or shot at. Dominic saw the maid's eyes narrow as she smiled. Didn't you only get shot at and chased by guards in Signia City because you were looting a recycling yard? Minor details. I still had a terrible time trying to get work there until I met Pops. The maid nodded. Alexis had told her a bit about Dominic's past, though she suspected that that princess had glossed over most of the less pleasant details. Should we send someone out to meet them? She asked instead of following that train of thought. Dominic shook his head. I will take a team to go see them. The sheriff and some of the guards should do the job. The maid nodded. Lady Alexis will insist that you take some of the royal guards with you as well as backup. That is understandable. You never know what sort of reaction you're going to get from strangers until you actually meet them. Though, if they could foresee the most likely outcomes, then this should be a relatively low-risk adventure, as the nomads were intending to stay in the duchy to begin with. Dominic went downstairs to gather the necessary staff, only to find that they had already been arranged before he was notified. It was good to have staff that knew you well, but this seemed a bit excessive, as if there wasn't really an option. Or perhaps the option was whether he was going with them or not. Now, to see how well I do on the back of a mechanical horse. Dominic joked. Prince Russell gave Dominic a curious look. With all your skills, how did you never make a comfortable life for yourself before reaching Signia? Seriously, I would have expected you to arrive as a wealthy merchant. Prince Fahad laughed at the confused Signia prince. You forget that while nobody was actively pursuing him, he was originally considered to be a war criminal on the run. Dominic nodded. If I stayed more than a week or two in one spot, someone would either send in a Dago's hunter, or the horns would get me in trouble. I had expected it to be the same in Signia, but as it turns out, a lot of things can be overlooked when you can prove yourself useful. Alexis waved him toward the door. Go, find your people and bring them back here. Just make sure that they're not going to cause trouble or freak out when they see an entire Axbridge field army sitting outside the city. Dominic gave her an enthusiastic thumbs up, and then joined the group headed for the stables to get mounts. He got 2 of the royal guards, 5 officers from Prince Russell's reservists, and 1 veiled maid, who reluctantly hopped up behind Dominic, as she didn't have any idea how to ride a horse. Not that she had a great deal of confidence that Dominic had any more riding skills than she did. If you tell me that you used to be a horse thief, it might actually make me feel better about this outing, she whispered while wrapping her arms around his waist. Unfortunately, no, but this is a mechanical horse. It doesn't buck or balk at commands. Just sit steady and you'll be fine. Dominic replied. Easy for you to say. I'm sitting side saddle. She muttered. Right. The maid was wearing a dress. It would be somewhere between awkward and scandalous if she straddled the horse, depending on how warmly she was dressed. The saddle was designed for 1 person and a cargo pack, so she was sitting where the bedroll and supplies would normally ride. A secure spot, though not the most comfortable option. The royal guards led the way out of town, setting a steady pace, a bit faster than a trot for the mechanical horses, but not so fast that it would look like they were rushing to get somewhere. As they reached the edge of town, more soldiers joined them. A squad of cavalry from each army came to join their outing, which turned their small force into a rather formidable one, flying the colors of 3 different nations. Dominic thought that it made them look as much like nomads as the actual nomads, but it would eliminate any chance of surprises when they met with the wandering mages. The group had gotten far closer than Dominic had expected, given that they had been detected by magic. They were already almost within the scouting range of the patrols when they emerged from the woods and spotted Dominic's patrol, led by the royal guards. They waved Dominic forward, and visible relief washed over the expressions of the elderly mages at the front of the group when they saw his horns. "Greetings. I am Duke Dominic Wavemates, Lord of Wistover. Our ladies of the Purity sect tell me that you are headed our way." He greeted them, not in the mood to play word games. The elderly mage folded his hands in front of him and bowed politely. "I am Elder Manif of the Duskblade sect. We have come to request the right to settle permanently in your city," he replied formally. Dominic turned to the royal guard, and then to the cavalry officers who had joined them. All of them simply shrugged. The Duskblade sect wasn't wanted by any of their nations, or known to be bandits. Of course, the old man could have simply made the name up on the spot to hide their identity. But the veiled maid hadn't alerted Dominic to danger. With one smooth movement, he swung his leg up to dismount, and scooped up the maid to set her on the ground behind him. Then Dominic walked over to the elders of the mage sect. "Please rise. Do you have anything with your sect name on it?" he asked. The elder smiled and pulled a well-worn amulet from around his neck. The jade wasn't high quality, but the age of the relic was easy to see, and it showed signs of having been attuned to someone in the distant past, hundreds of years prior. So it would be a sect relic passed down between leaders, no longer usable but a sign of leadership. Dominic smiled. "Well met, Elder Manif. If they come for peaceful settlement, Wistover welcomes the entire Duskblade sect. We have newly built housing and high-paying jobs available for your juniors." Elder Manif looked confused. "Just for the juniors?" Dominic shrugged. "It's assembling Magitech orbs and devices in a factory. Hardly the sort of dignified work that an elder would want. But it will pay more than enough to support the sect while the elders build their own sources of income and train the juniors." The other elders all turned to face Manif with excited expressions. Magitech on an industrial scale sounded like a much better-paying lifestyle than reclusive mages in a tower, as they had expected. But Manif had plans for the sect. "Duke Wistover, we had hoped to open a training facility for mages within Wistover. Tell me, is there one already established?" Dominic shook his head. "We have no elders to run a school at this time. We have elder techno-wizards teaching magical engineering to employees, but only juniors from the Purity sect." Manif nodded. "Because there are no elders of the Purity sect left. I was surprised when they granted a stay of execution to the juniors. We had thought of taking them in, but we didn't get the news until after the auction was long past. And honestly, we didn't have the money to purchase them from the Merchants Guild." Dominic would let them think that he had paid full price for the acolytes. It helped his reputation as a wealthy young noble. "Would you care to accompany us directly to Wistover now? I will arrange for a proper meal and short-term lodging when we arrive, and then we can discuss the construction of a mage tower." Elder Manif turned to confer with the rest of his people, then extended his hand to Dominic. "Your Grace, we will accept your hospitality, and gladly discuss the construction of a mage tower specifically for the Duskblade sect, and the students we wish to train." He agreed. The Duskblade sect began to come forward to offer polite greetings to Dominic, who noticed that they were all still dressed for the desert, despite the fact that they should have left it weeks ago, as they were traveling on foot. Wistover isn't unfriendly to those with a few added features. Dominic informed the elder with an upward glance, as if looking at his own horns. The mage smiled and shook his head. "We're not all sorcerers. Some are, but the majority of us are entirely human. It's a practice of the sect that we keep our heads covered. If we were still working as bodyguards, we would cover our faces as well. You see, the Duskblade sect has long been a mercenary guild-registered force, though not a powerful one. Then running a school will be quite the change for you," Dominic joked. The elder just shrugged. "Not so different. Mercenary work is dangerous work, so we've trained our fair share of new mages. Getting out of that line of work to focus on teaching new students seems a fair bit more presentable, don't you think?" "Most certainly. Though, I do believe there is an argument to be made that training mages as bodyguards is a highly marketable skill. A few of the other elders smiled at Dominic's words. If the Duke was saying what they thought he was, then they could make a name for themselves doing what they already knew best. Behind Dominic, the assigned soldiers shared nervous glances. The Duke of Westover negotiating to train combat mages was not on the schedule for today. They had been informed that the nomadic tribe might be a danger, but that appeared to be true for everyone but the Duke. Are we just going to collect every oddball with a bit of magic? One of the royal guards whispered from beside Dominic. That is very much the plan, yes. Nobody else is doing it, and I intend to have the most advanced Magitech city on the continent. We're not going to get the people we need if we start turning them away without a good reason. Dominic replied in a hushed tone. The mage sect convoy didn't appear to be in the best of shape, and they were moving slowly as they prepared for the last leg to Westover. Elder, will you accept a ride? I can see that it has been a long journey. Dominic offered, with a gesture toward his horse. The old mage shook his head. I'm not that old yet, Your Grace. It's just that we came across a clan of bugbears, and it took more out of us than expected to get away. How did I miss that? Guards, if you would be so kind. Dominic replied. The old man looked confused as the two Signia royal guards dismounted. But the paladins were quick to move to the mages and begin casting a minor healing spell on everyone who was limping or moving slowly. I have paladins, as well as a trollish healer, and some witches near the city. We have decent medical facilities already. There is no need to suffer in silence. Dominic explained. He could see that the guards were doing the bare minimum of healing as they moved, and checking the mages for distinguishing marks or signs that their story wasn't true. While Dominic's words had given them more work to do, it had also given them a good reason to put hands on the mages and get close enough to properly inspect them. With their hoods pulled low, it was difficult to tell who was who, but as they moved, they found that the core of the group was made of elderly women and children, surrounded by the more powerful mages, with the male elders out front. But the old women had some powerful magical jewelry on. They might not be just the wives of the elders, they were most likely sect elders themselves, and disguised as helpless old women as they protected the young ones. That told the paladins that these mages were still organized and didn't have that defeated mindset that many refugee groups got after even a few weeks on the road. Even after battle and lacking healing, they were still combat-ready and in defensive formation. My lord, the healing is done. Everyone should be ready to move. Dominic nodded, then mounted his horse and helped the maid up behind him. It's not far to Westover now. They will be expecting us, so we should get moving before dinner gets cold. Elder Manif smiled. The kitchens would never let a duke's dinner get cold, even if they had to make it 6 times. That was one of the perks of rank and wealth. But what he didn't know was that these royal paladins weren't assigned to him. They were for Alexis. When it came to the more important person in the house, it was unlikely that most of the staff would say that it was the Duke and not the Duchess. If he was in trouble with Alexis, the kitchen would almost certainly side with her and make him eat a cold dinner for being late. Dominic kept the horse to a slow walk, so he could pace beside Elder Manif, who had many questions. Lord Dominic, have you had training as a mage as well? I can feel that your inner mana level has progressed much more than average, he asked. Not formally. I do have a fair number of spells available, but mostly the ones available to soldiers plus a few utility ones, as I took blacksmithing as a trade. Once you are settled in, I may come for some additional courses. One of the things I would like to learn is the art of materia gem creation, so I can recreate crystals and spell gems. It would greatly benefit my Magitech orb creation attempts, he explained. That took the elder by surprise. The Duke wanted to learn to make highly advanced Magitech orbs. Not many high nobles kept up the trade skills of their youth once they had the title. Dominic shrugged when he saw the man's confusion. Hobbies are good for a man to have, and I have a knack for Magitech orbs. You'll see once we arrive in town, but I also had some success making new Magitech for the military during the conflict with Dagos. Elder Manif nodded. I have heard about that. It is said that the Signia army advanced remarkably quickly during the conflict, and that they made a duke of a wavemate's prince for your contributions. It's not common knowledge out in the desert just what those contributions were, but given your lineage, It seems more likely that they were magical than anything else. That's why I had asked if you were formally schooled. Dominic sighed dramatically. Sadly, the horns refused to be hidden, and no respectable facility would take me as a student during my youth. The elder's face wrinkled with suppressed laughter at Dominic's description of the situation. The horns weren't so much the problem as his reputation and name. Many sects quietly took in sorcerers of various sorts, but nobody wanted to be the sect caught harboring a war criminal. However, if Signia had not realized who he was, or if they had decided that it was less important to consider his past than his present capabilities, then they wouldn't mention that the Duke's reputation was absolutely terrifying. So they ignored the obvious. It shouldn't be an issue to send a tutor to the manor to assist in your studies, Your Grace. We've got many skilled candidates. Though, it seems you've found some assistants already. Elder Manif replied, with a glance at the veiled maid. Ah, not so much. This lovely lady is not my tutor, but an acolyte of the Purity sect, and now a veiled maid in the employ of the duchy. My wife, Princess Alexis, has a particular preference for skilled help. That caused hushed whispers through the sect. The Duchess was not only a princess, but she was forming a veiled maid force. In normal circumstances, that just meant that they were not ladies-in-waiting and kept their faces covered to avoid attracting suitors. But the way that Dominic said it implied that it was more than just that. If the princess was really reforming the old assassin force, they had candidates who would eagerly apply for the training. They were a mercenary sect at their core, and a lifelong appointment as a royal lady's veiled maid would be a dream job for many of them. Perhaps the Duke needed a butler student? The position of butler normally went to a most trusted and capable confidant, often someone who missed out on a royal guard appointment, or who had retired from such a position. It took years of training and memorization of all the nobles' personal preferences as well as political alliances in real time. But it was also a highly respected lifelong appointment. However, if one of their acolytes was chosen to train for the position under a new duke who surely needed people, they had a good chance of getting the job. The elder's mind was racing with possibilities that came to a crashing halt when he saw the assembled armies outside Westover. Your Grace, are you under siege? He stammered. Oh right, I forgot to mention the soldiers. No, we're not under attack. We have royal guests from Mitfield and Axbridge currently at the manor, and their men are stationed outside the city. They're not hostile, Dominic explained. The aging mage clutched his chest as he slowed his breathing. Good, good. You had me concerned there for a moment. I can guess what the situation is, given recent events. Where did you have available for us to set camp? He asked. Within the manor walls. There is a large clearing near the hayfields where you can set up, and then we will arrange a meeting with the infrastructure teams about building a mage tower and school. Behind Dominic, the mage shifted to whisper in his ear. Get them to teach everything. A mage school attracts a lot of attention, but a private academy that also teaches courses on magic is more subtle. Dominic nodded slightly so she could see that he understood. The procession stopped at the walls, and the Duskblade sect paused for a moment to take in the defenses of the keep. It was beautifully done, but the magic suggested that it was not elders of a mage sect who had done the defensive magic. That was true. It was techno-wizards and the workers of the infrastructure team, plus the acolytes of the Purity sect. However, it was sturdy and well-designed. The defensive fortifications were recently reconstructed, but the manor is well-equipped to handle guests. Please, do come in, Dominic explained. Your Grace, might I ask why you opted not to have a moat? One of the elders asked as they approached the gates. The foundations of the keep are deeper than the water level, difficult to undercut, but the primary reason was practical. I have a sensitive nose, and I don't like the smell of stagnant water, Dominic replied. The elder nodded, then smirked when one of his companions pointed up at the walls, where riflemen with Magitech rifles stood guard. The logic of a magical fortress was not that of a standard fortress. You didn't keep a moat, you added one when you needed it. For a keep full of magic users, digging a 3-meter trench around the walls and filling it with water was not an impossible task. It implied that they didn't expect to be attacked by a force that could overrun them before they could set proper defenses, But with 20,000 soldiers outside of town, that was probably true until the royal guests that Duke Dominic had mentioned were gone. Dominic let the maid down, and she silently signed to him. "I will go find Beth and get some soup. Fresh bread as well, if they have it." Dominic nodded. "I will settle them by the fields and then calm the goats." Letting the territorial horned menaces loose on guests would just be bad manners. The goats proved to be much more friendly toward the newly arrived mages than expected. Instead of their usual territorial challenges, they simply accepted that the sect was setting up in the field next to the hay, and pointedly ignored them after a few disinterested glances. "If you would like to send a few elders in after dinner, we can discuss your choices of locations, as well as the requests that I would make of your school. You see, we would like you to teach more than just magic. If the Duskblade sect teaches more than just magic, it will help reduce the need for a second school within the town, and give you an opportunity to build connections with more than just the mages of Westover. Normally, mages are sent for training after the age of apprentice selections. Not only does that cause many potential mages to end up in family trade skills that they are poorly suited to, it also reduces the quality of both mages and tradesmen. The school will have to hire teachers for subjects that the sect doesn't specialize in, but I'm sure that shouldn't be too big of an issue for you." Dominic paused, and the elders nodded. "Indeed. At one time, we did hire instructors for the essential skills of a mercenary. Now, we have teachers for all of the skills that we traditionally taught. But just to be clear, you would like us to run a primary school. A school for young children. Not just them, but yes, I want you to run a school for young children, and then keep on the ones with promise as mages or mercenaries. The city guard will take some of them off your hands at the end of training, and the Signia army will likely take the rest if they're willing. There shouldn't be a shortage of employment. But if you also have teachers for other useful skills around town, you can get the children prepared for life in a Magitech society before they start officially training for their career. You see, I would like everyone in town who has the magic to be able to at least do the basics for themselves." Dominic explained. Elder Manif nodded eagerly. "I think that I get what you're going for. There is a mage sect in Wagravia that is the size of a city. They train their acolytes to do everything that the city needs, and then promote the more powerful to higher ranks with better training and more access to resources. But if we copy that format without making everyone part of a mage sect, we can have a whole city with the skills to work at a Magitech factory, operate magical items without fear of self-harm, and even cast some basic magic. It might not replace the need for a mage tower, but simple things like a torn coat would no longer need to go to the tailor if they knew mend item. Even just having the basic knowledge of runes and theory to make a Magitech orb would let them work at one of the factories with days instead of weeks of training." Dominic nodded. "Exactly. We're starting with simple items and a repair stop for the Magitech carriages. But as we get more people, that will naturally expand. Soon, we will be the manufacturing hub for the entire eastern side of the continent." Elder Manif smiled. "Bold words. But I mean them. If we're making the finest soldiers, vehicles, and housewares on the continent, it wouldn't take much to become a household name in a better way than the memories of the invasion." Dominic explained. The maids came out with a large cauldron of soup and a bag full of freshly baked bread. "Miss Beth in the kitchen knew that you were coming, so she prepared." The maid explained. "Thank you. Elder, we can discuss more while we eat. Please call everyone over." The Duskblade sect was just completing their work, and a cluster of yurt-style tents were erected, finishing with a portable stone fire pit designed to prevent ashes or burnt rings on the ground that would indicate recent camp activity. Elder Manif set out a ring of chairs around the fire pit with what Dominic recognized as a spell, not stored items from his storage ring. "Nice trick," he noted. Elder Manif smiled. "We found that it's the best way. If we're not carrying anything permanent, then there is nothing to take from us if we are captured. The tents are kept with the camp followers, not the active sect members on assignment. When they go out, they use magic to set up their camps, so they're carrying nothing but clothes and food. A trained mage wouldn't even need to carry a weapon. They could make one when they needed it. Even a common belt knife, which wouldn't attract attention anywhere, would become the sharpest of swords in the hands of a battle mage. For that reason, many mages were known to simply carry a false wand. They could use magic to turn the stick into whatever they needed, and even if it was taken from them, it was no real loss. The captors would think that they had disarmed the mage, but in reality, the stick was just a prop, and the blade spell could be cast in the mage's hand just as easily, giving him the blade that they had tried to remove from him. Or her, Dominic mentally amended. Most of the women in the group had the hardened faces of people who knew what hardship and combat were all about. The maid served the elders, while a sect acolyte served everyone else, and one of the elderly ladies of the Duskblade sect stared intensely at Dominic. "Is there something amiss?" he asked cautiously. "Your face. I know that you're a young dragonkin, and I would have placed you in your late teens if I didn't know how old you were. But there isn't a mark on you. Not your face, your hands, your arms. Not even an old callus," she explained. Dominic shrugged. "I'm a bit too dragon for that. I heal quite well, and it doesn't leave scars." He would skip over the part that even if he did let it heal naturally and scar, it would fade the next time he killed something with an arcane blast. The smiles on the elders' faces grew as Dominic spoke, and the old woman nodded in satisfaction. "I knew that we had come to the right place. Now, I do hope that you don't mind a personal question." Dominic chuckled at the hesitant look on her face. "As long as it's suitable for public consumption, I will likely answer." "Your eyes glow a little when you are curious. Do you transform when you get excited? I don't mean a full shift, but perhaps some scales on your body, or fully glowing eyes?" she asked. Dominic nodded, then contemplated how much to tell these new arrivals. His claws weren't exactly a secret that should be fine to inform them. "When I need them, I can grow out my claws. It's retracting them that become the issue. Growing them is easy, but half the time I end up having to file them down into fingernails again." The old woman gripped her spoon so hard her knuckles were turning white. "Really? That is wonderful. So much dragon blood left in your lineage. Does your wife know?" Dominic tried not to laugh. "Oh yes, she is well aware. But the eyes glow as well, and that's not something that anyone can hide from their spouse." "How is your magic? We can help you train once the tower is up," she asked slowly, the excitement having drained much of her energy. "My spell selection is limited, but I am at level 13 now with my core skills." The old woman nodded. "What is your base level?" Dominic shrugged. "I have no idea. I have been focusing on improving my magic, and I haven't tested it. It's more efficient to funnel mana directly to the spells instead of making mana gems and then transferring them." "Oh, you must be friends with the second prince of Signia then?" "He's one of the few high mages who can use that technique," Elder Manif asked. "Well, I did marry his sister, but yes, you could call us friends." The elder smirked and patted Dominic on the shoulder. "Fear not. Any harsh feelings about taking away his sister will fade with time. My father-in-law was the previous sect master, and it took him nearly a decade to accept that his little girl was all grown up." Dominic laughed. "It's not the second prince I am most concerned with. It's the crown prince who is unlikely to accept that his most precious sister is a married woman. Even Prince Russell was abrupt when we first met. Princess Alexis remains a favored daughter among the militant members of the Signia royalty, and the thoughts of anyone spending husbandly time with her puts her brothers into full protective mode." Dominic caught the sound of the maid's laugh before she stifled it. Indeed, most of the reason that Russell had been harsh with Dominic when they first met was because he had viewed him as the usurper who had the audacity to steal his sister. According to Alexis, the soft and feminine sisters were more ornamental to the princes, always intended to be married off into good families to ensure their future. But the twin princesses were different, more like one of the brothers as well as battle comrades, who had seen dozens of fights at the prince's sides. Now they were both to be married women and moved away from the palace. Princess Eleanor had better not be getting notions of marriage anytime soon. She was the last of their little sisters to dote upon. Having listened to the conversations between the princess and her brother since he arrived, the maid knew that the nostalgia for childhood good times was strong with Prince Russell. He was not ready for the change of generations yet, where all his childhood friends became right proper noble adults, taking over from their parents. "Why don't we test your innate level? It will help develop a plan to assist your development as Duke. Or were you not planning to become a master mage? Elder Manif asked. Indeed, I am intending to be a master mage at some point. A master blacksmith as well, but that's becoming more of a hobby than a trade, as I focus more on magitech engineering and magic. Dominic agreed. The mage shrugged. Even a mage tower needs a master smith if they can get one. The two aren't mutually exclusive, though your growth rate might be slower with a blacksmith's trade skill orb than an archmage's gift. All right, what do we need to do? Dominic asked. Put your hands against mine, and push as much mana as you can toward me. It's unlikely that you will be able to overpower me in a mana wrestling match. I'm a level 30 mage. Elder Manif explained, and his mother was half siren. His magical affinity was extremely high, though he hadn't inherited any of her non-human appearance. Dominic put his hands against the elders and then pushed. He could always move a large amount of mana, but this was a test of pressure, not volume. The elder braced himself as Dominic did his best, arms trembling with effort as their mana collided. Then Elder Manif nodded, and Dominic stopped the effort. That is truly impressive. I would put you at level 4 on an innate level. That is far beyond what most can claim at your age, and more than 90% of human archmages. Even the second prince should only be a little stronger than you on an innate level. However, his trade skill core and his practical level are far beyond either of us. When it comes to mages, I have an advantage due to bloodline, in that my innate level and practical level are the same. But I am also an old man. By the time that you or the second prince are my age, you will be the same. Well, assuming that the royal Signia bloodline is strong enough in the second prince. If not, his innate level will stop far short of his trade skill peak. The common name for it is reaching your potential. But really, it's closer to being a sign that you're reaching the end of your lifespan. Your body is giving all that it can give, and you've accomplished everything it had the potential to. So, the only way forward is down. The elder elaborated with a sigh. Dominic patted the elder on the shoulder. Don't be too harsh on yourself. I'm sure that you've got many good years left ahead of you. Elder Manif smiled indulgently. Soon, my level will start to degrade. But it hasn't yet. Fortunately for me, with my mixed bloodline, I have made it to level 30. At the usual rate of a year or two per level, I'll have decades to pass on my wisdom before it's my time. The elderly woman beside him gave him a sly wink. At least now that we're settling in a civilized city. No need to fear ambushes by bandits or wild monsters here. Letting declining elders be the rearguard is all well and good in the desert, but we shouldn't have to do any running away once we get a tower built. Tell me, Duke Dominic, did you have a particular spot in mind? She asked. Dominic took out his map of the village. I actually do. There is a nice hill, just outside the town's main residential zone, and it's all stone. No matter how good our Millie is, she can't grow crops on bare rock, and it's higher ground, so there is little to no chance of flooding. Well, this river rarely floods to begin with, as you can see by the state of the grounds after a decade left unattended. But it's an excellent spot for a mage tower and school. It's easy to find, far enough from town that you can build outdoor training areas without feeling cramped, but close enough that kids from town can walk back and forth every day. They might not like walking most of a kilometer in the rain, but they'll get used to it eventually. The elders smiled, while the maid laughed softly. Getting stuck out in the rain while working was an essential part of nearly every job that most commoners would have. Whether you were walking to and from work or actually working outdoors, you had to learn to get used to the weather. Jobs like the blacksmith, who lived in his nice warm forge, were exceedingly rare. Just the fact that their homes were going to have constant heating without worrying about the cost of wood was going to change lives in Westover. Normally, when times got tough, there was a choice between being warm or being well-fed. But with a Magitech fireplace, the dilemma was just about how well-fed you could be on a limited budget. The elders examined the map with its markings for what fields were currently worked and what farmhouses were occupied. The area around town is coming along quite well. But can I ask why you chose to put the closest barrens so near? Elder Manif asked. Practicality. We're under threat from wild monsters, and there are no nearby cities or forces to assist us most of the time. So, I had them settle where they were within easy rescue range. Their holdings might be rather small, but that's the size they were under Wavemate's leadership, and it was enough. If it's not enough now, we can expand them outward to cover more territory, while the core of the duchy's income will be the town itself. Manif nodded and examined the map again. That makes sense. I had forgotten how remote this region was. It's a bit like being back in the desert with nobody for dozens of kilometers in any direction, except that the land is so much more fertile. I see elevation marks for a large terraced hill here. What are they growing? Rice, he asked. Wine grapes. We have rice fields down by the river, where they can be deliberately flooded with the irrigation canals. But it's not one of our primary crops. Most of the farmers are growing grains and potatoes to go with their vegetables. The other elders nodded and mumbled to themselves as they examined the area. Yes, this will be best. Our school won't bother the farmers, as none of the crops are ones that react negatively to nearby mana use. It will take us some time to build a whole school complex, but we have the talents ourselves, if you want to leave it to us. Manif suggested. I will send some men from the Royal Infrastructure team with you. They are experts in the field, and they can assist, while also relaying any updates on the school's likely requirements. I know that the king has standards for school's insignia, but I don't personally know what they are. Dominic explained. Right, it wouldn't do for us to be accused of substandard education or facilities. We wouldn't turn down the help of experts anyhow. While we have the spells to build a home, none of us have much experience with it. The mages only learned it to repair damages that they have done during a fight, so that their intrusions aren't immediately detected. That was one way to use construction magic, for sure. The logic of nomadic mercenaries wasn't the same as that of the infrastructure group, so letting them both work together might just lead to something wonderful. Even the strangest of new ideas could lead to innovation, and having so many mages in town at once was going to save them months or years of work. This should work out nicely. I will have someone come over to show you the location in the morning, and the sect can get started on the tower. But for tonight, enjoy yourselves. The elders are invited for dinner in the manor, but we unfortunately don't have the seating for the whole sect. Dominic offered. That is more than generous. Thank you, Your Grace. We will humbly accept your invitation. The sect is fast to get settled, and most of us will turn in early tonight, after such a long journey. Might I ask what the dress code will be? Elder Manif asked. Noble casual. Just put on your better robes and you will be fine. We don't stand on ceremony. In the Wavemates tradition, there are both common men and royals at the same table, so you won't be underdressed. Dominic returned to the house to find Pops flirting with Beth, while Mead sat at one of the counter-height chairs, helping roll dough into balls for dinner buns. Expect 8 elders of the Duskblade sect for dinner, on top of the other guests. He informed the cook, who seemed a bit relieved that Dominic hadn't invited half the sect. He had already gotten her to serve 100 liters of soup plus all of her pre-made bread loaves today, so being able to cut back a bit would be a relief. Dominic smiled at the cook. Don't let my unreasonable demands make you think that I don't appreciate all that you do for us. Having so much food ready when the guests arrived was wonderful. The Duskblade sect has been following a magical guiding spell since they left the western deserts of Axbridge, and a proper sit-down meal made their whole week. They will be staying in the courtyard for some time, while they build a new school and mage tower outside of town. We needed somewhere to educate the children, and they have the educated people to do the job. Beth nodded. That should work out well. If they can get the school built before the rains get too bad, then the children can start their education while work on the farms is slow. It's a bit late for the typical Signia school schedule, but close enough that they're not losing a whole year. Not that most of them would have gone to a fancy formal school to begin with. Pops laughed at the thought of every farmer sending their kids to school full-time. Most of them hardly taught the kids to read. Dominic understood his laughter and shrugged. We haven't worked out a schedule, but I wanted the kids to at least learn enough that they wouldn't get left behind in a town that is beginning to focus on magitech factories. We will need a new generation to keep things running, and a Mage Tower run school will do that. As long as they can all read, and they learn enough to take on a trade, it will be enough for me, but the trades we are going to have will require higher than usual standards. Pops nodded. That makes sense. Already the ones working at the factory making jars are getting excited about making fireplaces, and about seeing the steam tractors pull in. It won't be long before we've got them clamoring for raises and more training so they can also work with the carriage maker to fix steam vehicles. Then someone will want to make them ourselves, and we will be building more factories. Beth winked at Pops. Sounds like your perfect town. Nothing but the ringing of hammers on metal, and a bit of magic in everything. Pops chuckled and smoothed his beard. Well, I can't argue with that. Town is better with a touch of magic to it. Dominic left the pair to their strange flirting, and ignored Meade's pleading look for him to stay and help with the dinner buns. There were already 3 other maids in the room making the dough balls. They didn't need any more hands. Meade just wanted a distraction, since there was no room to work at the main table, and she was stuck at the counter next to Pops and Beth. Prince Fahad joined Dominic in the sitting room as soon as he left the kitchen, and poured them both a drink. I hear that the Duskblade sect are making themselves comfortable in the far fields. My soldiers were startled to see so many mages in one spot, but it looks like they're not going to cause any trouble. He began. Very little, I am certain. The real arguments will begin when it comes time to work out the curriculum for the school. They're used to training mercenary battle mages, and we're going to send them school children with a future in the factories. Dominic agreed. The prince nodded. I can see that becoming an issue. Their sect is one that is familiar to me. I looked them up when the officers informed me of their identity. They are one of many nomadic mage clans, small but strong enough that they never turn to banditry. Some of their members are on wanted lists for unsavory mercenary jobs and assassinations, but the sect itself isn't known to cause troubles. They didn't try to hide their sect's nature. They were open from the start about what sort of sect they were. I think that it might work out in our favor. They can do some additional training for our guardsmen. We're soon to be short on town guards again with the way that the town is expanding, and I intend to have them help train the next batch. A week or 2 with the mages, a month or 2 with the general, and we should have guardsmen that can deal with anything that comes their way. Then we can start adding battle mages to the town guard as well so that we can send patrols with a mage. If I recall, that is a common practice in all of Axbridge, isn't it? Dominic asked. He had stayed away from the bigger cities, as they spelled trouble for him. But it was common practice in the less populated western regions. It is where we have enough of them to make it practical. Mages don't grow on trees, and the town guard doesn't pay well enough to keep them around. You may wish to consider the budget before making grand plans to expand the guard. Prince Fahad warned. Excellent point. I will run it by Alexis. She's got a better grasp of the budget than I do. Fahad took a long swill of the strong liquor, then sighed wistfully. You know, you've got it good, don't you? If my wife was half as capable as your Alexis, I would have far less white hair. A decade she's been training to become queen already. Lessons every day on top of a lifetime of grooming. And still, it's better that I have staff handle household affairs, or she'd frustrate me to an early grave. Dominic winked at him. Then we had best not mention this to Prince George. Fahad laughed quietly. The Mitfield prince was far too young to be as bald and white-haired as he was. But in his case, it was far more from stress than a troublesome wife. Dinner brought them back to the main room, and to a stack of documents that Dominic had not been expecting. The royal messenger arrived only moments ago. We've got 2 weeks to finish the upgrades to the manor before Crown Prince Claudius arrives to inspect the facility's suitability for use in international negotiations. Alexis announced. Dominic sighed dramatically. This is the end for me. It had to be him. Prince Fahad nearly choked on his drink, while the other 2 princes looked confused. Alexis rolled her eyes, but didn't say anything, leaving Pops to explain the situation. Prince Claudius disapproves of his sister getting married, not just to Duke Dominic but in general. He was a leading voice in the movement to convince her to take an oath of celibacy to remain with the royal paladins. He explained, "At least we will have most of the improvements finished by the time that he arrives. The convention center is doing well, and the officers have been quite approving of using it for their meetings. But the expansion of the manor is nearly finished as well. All we need is to do the landscaping and some final decoration. Prince Russell replied. Alexis nodded. Millie, our garden witch, will do the landscaping, and I have the stored items for the decoration of the extra courtyards. By the time that he arrives, it will just be the rest of the city that needs to be finished. Dominic shrugged. The factory will be ready to make their first shipment by then, and if we push, the school will be ready as well. Should we arrange a grand opening ceremony for the school for after his arrival? Some sort of public event to distract him from domestic affairs? No! Every one of the royals replied at the same time. All right then. I take it I misunderstood his affinity for social events. Dominic asked. Not at all. It's the rest of us who don't want to be at a social event with him. They're never grand or well organized enough for his taste. But he never wants to be part of the planning or any of the event but a speech. Alexis replied. Well, that was not the response that I was expecting, but it seems that he has a reputation nearly as well known as my own. Prince George turned to stare incredulously at Dominic. How do you even come to that conclusion? He's simply known by his fellow royals as an escape artist when it comes to social obligations. Your reputation would get your title recognized anywhere on the continent by even common shopkeepers. Prince Fahad nodded. We had an envoy from Flokwar in for the New Year's ceremony last year, and he already knew the story of how Dagos had been sending envoys to demand searches for you. They're on the other side of the continent, and they don't even speak our language. Prince George nodded. The story of the Butcher of Westover is being told to scare noble children into staying out of the woods in at Ford. They claim that you are living in seclusion there, looking for noble children to vent your rage on. That was also on the other side of the continent, but the far south and not the west. Fine, I get the point. Perhaps I might have underestimated my own fame. It's not like most people recognize me in person. Dominic sighed. That is likely to change. Now that you're the Duke of Westover, more nobles will start to visit, and you will have proper portraits and artists' renders spread, so that those who might be doing business with Westover won't mistake someone else for you. Prince Russell noted. Alexis smiled. They've already started. We do a lot of business with the Merchants Guild, and they all recognize him right away, even when he's wearing a smithy apron. So, while some of the nobles might be behind on receiving the message, those most likely to come here surely know by now. Prince Russell smiled. But that's also to your advantage. Nobody will believe his reputation after having met him once. However, it will remain in the back of their minds when they're doing business with the duchy. I don't think that the Crown Prince will be too upset with the state of the duchy when he arrives. You're doing far better than any territory established a single season ago has any right to be doing. Even if your name's pulled the finest of settlers to you, I still hadn't expected the duchy to be doing so well. Even the common farmers are talking about being overstocked with preserved goods and bulk food. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Never mind that Dagos is in a massive famine. Even Axbridge rarely has seasons that good. Prince Fahad nodded in agreement. That is part of the reason that we chose this location. The geography is most of it, but the Westover region never seemed to suffer from famine or civil unrest in the past. It's simply too remote to be affected by other regional issues. Dominic shrugged. I can't argue with that. Even if the major cities need food, it takes significant effort to get it to them from here. Even the old Signia farms end close to 100 kilometers from the border. There isn't anything else here to draw residents. Elder Manif smiled as he listened to the royals joking around with each other. The fact that members of the royal families of 4, now 3, different nations were all getting along at one table proved to him that they had made the right choice in coming to Westover. Duke Dominic was easy to work with, but even more importantly, both him and Princess Alexis had good relationships with the royals closest to their territory. With that level of cooperation, the chances that this duchy would falter under political pressure and start bleeding the citizens dry to maintain their influence seemed incredibly low. The elder had also heard them mention that the factories were not privately owned, but property of the duchy. That would help their coffers immensely. Too many nobles had no head for business and simply taxed the businessmen of their territory to fund their lifestyle. In regions where that was not the case, the missions that their sect was called to complete tended to be much lower risk, and have targets who actually deserved the protection or elimination order placed on them. The next morning, Elder Manif was met by Dominic and a short man in a royal engineer's coat. Elder Manif, this is Engineer Marcos. He has just finished the upgrades of the manor grounds, and he will be helping you build the schoolhouse while your sect works on their tower. Dominic explained. The elders of the Duskblade sect smiled. Thank you for the consideration, Your Grace. Letting them make their own tower meant that they could keep some of their secrets and set the layout themselves, while the public areas of the schools would be created by the Royal Infrastructure Team, saving them time. As I believe you heard last night, we have 2 weeks to get the school ready. The Crown Prince of Signia will be here then, and I want everything to be in place before his arrival. Tell me now if you don't think that is possible. Dominic instructed. It could be tight with the furniture. We will order it with the Merchants Guild the next time they arrive, but it will take time to be shipped from a furniture maker in one of the cities. Until then, the classes will have simple benches for students to listen to lectures. Elder Manif explained. Dominic nodded. Even if it's makeshift benches and tables made of sawed planks, just having the kids in school will help us impress the Crown Prince. That should be easy enough. I don't know how many woodcutters you have, but I'm certain that we can manage something. We also have a real knack for clay tile roofs. They're quite common in the desert, and we've had to repair thousands of them to hide signs of battles. The buildings themselves will go up fast. Elder Manif agreed. Engineer Marcos patted him on the back. Well then, let's get started. Call your people over and I will grab a team to start staking out the school. Speaking of which, how much space are we planning for? Dominic frowned. Good question. Probably plan for a few hundred kids to start with and leave room for more. In a town this size, we shouldn't need dorms, but when the barons start to move into the surrounding territories, they will most likely send their kids here for at least a few years. So, plan for some residences as well. And guard barracks. The general will send guard candidates here for training in magical combat. But they won't be with the children, so we will want separate rooms for them. Letting them go home every night wastes training time. Consider it a form of boot camp, though they're not technically military. Engineer Marcos added. Right? Almost forgot about that. The school complex is going to be rather large, but eventually we will need all of it. Just do the best that you can, and we will furnish it as we have the ability. Dominic added. We will do our best. Do you have any updates on when the next convoys are expected? Marcos asked. Dominic shook his head. I know that they got our last round of requests, but that's about it. I haven't gotten any messages about new shipments, but I might have to work a deal to get some communication tokens made so that we can at least contact senior merchants guild members. I know that the Castellan has some ability to get in contact with them, but it's not as detailed as a conversation. Elder Manif nodded. I can help you with that, but the materials that are needed can be a pain. The tokens are made of a specific sort of jade, and they're extremely fragile as well as expensive to make. If you want to have a conversation, it will need linked tokens. That means only one specific person, and that there is a risk they will be able to listen in on your conversations when they are trying to contact you. And a written message? Dominic asked. Less complex, but the same materials. It will display the request when activated, but that means the message has to be short or it's unreadable. That is a bit annoying as a limitation. An expensive jade item that's too fragile to make in a larger size, but text is the best option. No wonder everyone has such a difficult time passing important information. Dominic sighed. Elder Manif smiled. Well, there is a new Magitech device known as a telegraph. It's a wired communicator, which has its own limitations. But if the wire is undamaged, you can rapidly send messages back and forth to another city. Dominic laughed. Can you imagine how much effort it would take to run a wire even to Limpsbury or Castle City? It's over 500 kilometers to Castle City. Where would we even get that much wire? The elder mage shrugged. Probably not the best choice for our situation, but I hear that Signia is working on better radios for their airships. That should help once the experiments are finished. An airship over Westover and one over Castle or Limpsbury should theoretically be able to communicate by radio if the radios had the range. That is something that we will have to keep in mind. Even for the barony manors, I would like to have radio communications. There shouldn't be a need to travel back and forth for a simple message. Dominic agreed. The mage nodded. That is something that we can do. The Duskblade sect has some skill making radios, and we can install them in a few important locations for you. Say the manor, the barony manors, the mage tower, the guard barracks, and the sheriff's office. I think that should cover all the important locations for now. It at least gets all the spots where the ones in charge of responses will normally be working. Even if someone is away from the radio for a moment, the message should reach someone. Dominic agreed. All right, I will send someone to the techno-wizards in town and borrow their workspace to build the radios while most of the sect works on the tower. Engineer Marcos and his team should finish about the same time we do, with plenty of time to spare before the Crown Prince arrives. Dominic thought about the needs of the construction teams for a few more seconds, then decided on his next course of action. I will go talk to the woodcutters. There is a basic steam-powered sawmill outside of town, but I know that they have been doing most of the work with magic instead. If we can upgrade the sawmill a little more, we will have an easier time turning out all the wood that we will need, including specialty cuts for the carpenters. Dominic made his way across town and out to the sawmill, which he could hear happily working away as someone cut material for a project. "Morning, gentlemen. What are we working on today?" he asked the group of hunters that were working the sawmill with one lone woodcutter to guide them. "John, the carpenter, wants us to cut a bunch of these larger trees for tabletops. The new houses need them, and we're short on mages at the moment with all the new buildings going up," the woodcutter explained. "Ah, then I'm about to bring you bad news. We're building a schoolhouse, and we will need desks and chairs or benches for the kids," Dominic explained. The woodcutter shrugged. "I'm sure that we can find more men to work on the project, but we've only got the one saw." Dominic nodded. "We've got some newly arrived mages from the Duskblade sect who are going to build a tower here and run the school, so they'll be doing the majority of the work. But we will need pre-cut boards to save time, and someone will need to fell them as well. So here I am, checking what state we're at. We're good on small trees for building boards and firewood, but we don't have a lot of larger trees downed. There wasn't any good reason for it, and the smaller ones needed cleared anyhow. Most of them come from the edge of fields or too close to houses. Trees that have grown in the last decade, you see. But I can have the boys drop a couple and drag them here with an ox team," the woodcutter suggested. "I will have to talk to John. I don't know how many trees it will take to make a schoolhouse full of desks." Dominic realized. The woodcutter laughed. "One. The answer is one. Cut one knuckle thick and polished, you could make a new tabletop for every house and still have enough wood to do a school full of desks with one large tree. In fact, this one might be enough even though it's short. It was hit by lightning and broke off, so it's only half height, but it's still a lot of wood. There is a whole other log sitting outside from the same tree that we haven't even started on. All right, I will go talk to John, since he's going likely to be the one making them, unless we have other carpenters available." The men gave him a slight bow. "Good luck, my lord. There are more carpenters in town, but he's the most skilled. John will set you on the right path for sure." Dominic left them to their work and went looking for the carpenter, who was usually working with architect Suni and the men of the Purity sect. Suni was outside one of the houses under renovation, making him easy to find, so Dominic took a moment to check on the progress. "Lord Dominic, we've nearly got this one finished. Did you come to check on our progress?" Dominic nodded. "That too. I came to spread the news that we're putting up a new school, and we'll need furniture. The Crown Prince of Signia will be here in 2 weeks, and we are hoping to have the kids in school by the time that he arrives." The short man smirked and lit a cigarette. "Well, you can't have him accusing you of slacking or raising an uneducated populace. The board cuts that they're making for the tables will work well enough for school desks, I reckon. How about starting them with folding chairs? We can get a whole trailer of them from the Merchants Guild easily enough. It would take time to make them, or tool the factory for them, but they're easy to pack. That's not a bad idea. Nothing says just getting started like a room full of folding chairs. Dominic laughed. Plus, they're useful even if you replace them with better chairs in the classroom. You never know when you'll need a lot of seats for an outdoor function or a large meeting. They might not be fancy enough for use in the manor, but we're going to need them for weddings in the park. Suni suggested. That's a mighty fine point. We'll need a bunch for the convention center as well. The upstairs has furniture in the rooms, I believe. But the main floor is just open right now. It would be a good spot for weddings on rainy days. The architect nodded. See, good and useful things they are. We can slam out a load of wooden desks, no problem. So, if you can arrange chairs, we will have the school ready for sure. 1 or 2 fewer houses before the Crown Prince arrives won't make a big difference. Not when we've got an entire infrastructure team building a subdivision and a second factory at the edge of town. They've grown properly fond of that road machine, too. There won't be a dirt road anywhere in the duchy if they stay for a year. No real downside to that. I will go talk to Castellan Julio and get him to add the chairs to the list. Hopefully, we can get them with the next shipment. Suni shook his head. No, the next shipment is already on its way from Limpsbury if I'm not mistaken. It should be here tomorrow or the day after. Dominic smiled. In that case, we should be just fine. No matter which major city they head to next, we will have time for them to arrange the chairs to arrive here on time before the Crown Prince does. Dominic's optimism turned out to be misplaced only hours later, when a Cygnia airship was spotted incoming from the southeast. The message had given them 2 weeks before Crown Prince Claudius would arrive, but just as everyone else had done, he was incredibly early for the meeting. Dominic jogged over to the airship fields, where dozens of other vessels were already anchored. Do we have someone to marshal another airship in? A royal from Cygnia should be aboard that airship. Dominic asked the first man he found standing around the field. Yes, Your Grace. We were just discussing where to have him land. Nobody was sure if we should guide him to the field or have him anchor on the manor house directly, as they've identified the airship as Crown Prince Claudius. He replied, Right, the airships all had radios. Have him land here in the clearing. The roof of the manor isn't set up to anchor the airship, and the compound has a full mage sect camped in it. No room for him to land there. Dominic relayed. Got it. The worker ran off, and seconds later the airship was descending, headed for the landing area where all the others had unloaded their cargo before moving to a parking area to be anchored down. The moment that the airship's landing rope was secured, Prince Claudius jumped down from the vessel, then stretched his arms over his head with a smile on his face. Not a fan of flying, Your Highness? Dominic asked in a teasing tone. I don't mind the heights, but being stuck in a cramped airship with a bunch of royal advisors and actuaries for the meetings with Axbridge and Mitfield is not my idea of fun. Just because the airship can carry a few more people should not mean that we have to cram them in. Claudius grumbled. Then perhaps you would like to start with a shower? It's only a few minutes to the manor. Dominic suggested. Prince Claudius shook his head. It's the crowded spaces, not the smell, that bothers me. I've killed far too many goblins for a few over-perfumed nobles to offend my senses. Indeed, the airship did smell like a house of ill repute. Unwashed bodies and far too much perfume used to cover the lingering sense of days spent aboard. Once they were in the open for a few minutes, the potency would diminish rapidly. But the interior of the airship would need days to be properly ventilated and cleaned before you could enter without being immediately hit with the scent. The same was done for all the other airships, but it was mostly the scent of too many soldiers with no shower and beans for breakfast. Questionably worse than the perfume, but no less lingering in its potency. In that case, why don't we take the long way back? We weren't expecting you for another fortnight, but the village is doing quite well already. Dominic suggested. Oh, I heard that you have made some progress with the merchants. I take it that you've had a good crop, he asked. Indeed, but we are also selling small amounts of Magitech, and we've got a full shipment of Magitech fireplaces ready to go out when the caravan arrives tomorrow. How about we stop at the factory first, and you can see how the process works? The Crown Prince smiled at Dominic's offer. That sounds wonderful. Though, with your specialties, I had thought that it would be a steam tractor or weapons factory built first. Dominic laughed. I'm not the one working in the factory this time, but we do have repair bays for the caravan's tractors. We intend to expand to making new ones as well, but we're still getting our workers trained on the simple Magitech orbs for the fireplaces and lamps, so we haven't gotten to a full-on tractor factory. The sounds of the production line could be heard from well outside the factory walls, and the Crown Prince was becoming visibly excited as they approached. You really did make a whole factory for Magitech? How did you even find enough techno-wizards? He asked. We didn't. The fireplaces used the most basic of Magitech orbs, so we had the techno-wizards that we did find spend weeks training new students as factory workers. You could call them Magitech engineering apprentices, but without much likelihood of becoming journeymen. You see, there isn't much ongoing training, as the factory only makes a few items. However, as we expand into more complex products, there will be openings for more training and a path forward for the production line workers. The fireplaces might not be glamorous, but they are still Magitech, and the guild should give us a good price for them. That allows us to pay the workers quite generously, to the point that there won't be many complaints about a career on the production line. Dominic narrated as they approached. Then, he swung open the door to reveal the process inside. Welcome, Crown Prince, to the Westover Magitech factory. Prince Claudius stared in awe at the efficient layout of the factory, from the clay casting molds and kiln, to the die cutters that were sending stacks of metal plates down the line, and finally to the pair of mages in the corner, meditating as they created low-quality gems for the fire creation and light orbs. Everything is done in one place, and the only raw materials we need are clay and mages. There is a large riverside quarry just outside of town, with enough sediment to keep us at full production for years. We are hoping that the rainy season washes enough good gray clay down river to replace what we've pulled out because we've got a mountain of it moved to settle before use. But we will sort out supply issues when we get to them. Dominic explained. Claudius shook his head. I think that the amount of clay will be the least of your concerns. This is stunning, and you have most definitely underestimated the amount of envy that such wealth will provoke. Tell me, what family owns this factory? Mine. Well, ours. It belongs to the duchy, and Princess Alexis has taken charge of our budget. Dominic explained. A duke who doesn't do his own budgeting? Dominic shrugged at the accusation. She's better at it than I am. Besides, even if she wanted to go all out and buy a mountain of jewelry or fine silks, we could just trade them for factory goods and still turn a profit. Prince Claudius smiled. The thought of Princess Alexis becoming a spoiled and girly noblewoman, wallowing in luxury and uselessness, was just so ridiculous that he couldn't put her face to the image. Well, you should be fine then, as long as she takes a large enough guard on her monster hunting trips. He allowed. Dominic smirked. About that, you'll understand when we get to the manor. She's not short on guards, but we've got a mage tower going up to train even more. We shouldn't bother them while they're working. I see that they have a significant stockpile already prepared for shipment. And is that a gantry crane? Claudius asked. Indeed it is. We thought that it would help move the items in bulk, but it's also available to lift steam tractors that need large parts removed, or work on the underside. A crane is just all around useful to have. That pile there is enough for 2 carriages in a merchant caravan. In theory, they could buy many more of them from us, but even 600 at a time is going to be an extremely expensive shipment, and it might not all go in one convoy. The merchants are happy to buy what they can, but the guild members are still independent merchants, and not all of them can afford such luxury. Claudius nodded. Better than the non-guild members. I believe you were involved in an incident with one when you first arrived in Signia, were you not? The fellow whose convoy was lost to goblins. I remember the petition from his employees to liquidate his assets to pay back wages. Dominic laughed. Oh? How did that go? Claudius shrugged. I have no idea. We approved the petition, but that goes to the bureaucrats. It doesn't concern me how much he had for them to actually collect from. Collecting from a dead man would never be easy, but there was no guarantee that the merchant was even from Signia, or that he owned a home. Most would. Merchant caravans weren't a cheap endeavor. But there was no security to the job. Much of the job was knowing what to buy and at what price. You had to pay for it in advance, which meant that you had to find a buyer willing to pay more than what you bought it for. It wasn't a job that Dominic would want. Let's go see the rest of the city before we head to the manor. I will assume that there will be rooms ready for me by then, Claudius suggested. Dominic smiled. Indeed. We added secondary courtyards for visiting guests, all equal distances to the entrance to the main manor. But given your identity, Alexis might find a different spot for you. Claudius smirked. Good call. If there was one tucked in the back of the compound, or visible over the walls, she might just stuff me there. Is Russell still here as well? Dominic nodded. Indeed. He's come to clear the area with his reservists, and they're currently at the manor, taking up the job of representing Signia. Perfect. I think that I will let him keep the position. I will inspect the area for suitability, and then let him do the negotiations. I assume you have no objections. Dominic shook his head. Not at all. How about we go see the convention center? We've still got furniture coming for it, but it's functional for basic events now, and they've built cots in the upper-level rooms for the officers. Claudius smiled, a genuine expression of amusement. You do have good advisors, don't you? Most don't think of the secondary officers who aren't staying with their noble leader. Leaving them with the enlisted men all the time makes them cranky. But you can't put them all in one inn with a gathering this size. Dominic winked at him. We've covered most things now, I think. The Adventurers Guild is going to come take residence in the convention center soon, I am told. Then they will take over operations when it's not in use for formal functions. The Crown Prince narrowed his eyes. There is something shady going on there, isn't there? I don't see you running a brothel, so I'm guessing a casino. You're good. It's all on the up and up. Nothing out of the ordinary, and it's out of sight, where it won't cause issues for anyone in town. We also set up deliveries to the armies every morning, with both a market cart from the farmers and a witch to deliver potions. Dominic explained. A witch? What could they need? Dominic smirked at him. Are you not familiar with traveling soldiers? If they haven't caught something, they haven't left home yet. The coven here stocked up medicine ever since they arrived, and now they can make their returns. The Crown Prince sighed. You have a point. 2 weeks after we left Signia, my whole regiment seemed to come down with the same stomach bug. We checked every supply wagon for rot, and then realized it was from a bad batch of homebrewed liquor. Then you understand. There is always a need for medicine, especially if they've brought camp followers. You are too realistic, you know that? The Crown Prince looked around the town, and then paused just before they reached the convention center. I see nearly everything that a town could need. Techno-wizards, Pop's Forge, a carriage maker, tailor, baker, butcher shop, open market, and a few who didn't see fit to put up signs. But what is that building? Some sort of memorial? Or is it a security bunker? He asked. Ah, that is a memorial crypt. You see, the whole area was cursed, and it chased people away. In order to break the curse, I had to do some cleaning. So, I put all the bones in a pile and built a crypt for them. I will do some other barony manors in the area soon. I've just been busy. It's probably better than when settlers start to arrive that the aftermath of the war isn't scattered all over their new yard. Dominic explained. Prince Claudius did the mental math on how many bones would be needed to fill a crypt that size. It was an impressive battle, for certain. All right, let's see the convention center, and that should just leave the manor grounds. I think that everything else that the king put on the checklist is already here. Our royal father was quite concerned that the princess might be struggling to adapt to rural living. But this doesn't look nearly as rural as expected, despite being incredibly remote. The inside of the convention center was simple, with no furniture except a few long tables and benches that were currently occupied by officer from the Axbridge army. There was another table on the other side of the room, but it was currently unoccupied, and presumably reserved for the Mitfield officers. Lord Dominic, good morning. Are you coming to join our game? One of the captains called as they entered. Just showing Crown Prince Claudius around the town. Dominic replied. Everyone turned to bow toward the prince. Forgive us, your highness. We didn't recognize your uniform. The prince was wearing the uniform of a royal paladin general, but you didn't salute a foreign soldier, so they hadn't been concerned about his presence. How are the rooms on the upper level? Sufficient? Claudius asked. Indeed, your highness. Not fancy by any stretch of the imagination, but the bags are decently soft mats on large enough cots that my feet don't hang off. The officer who had spoken first replied. He was a large man, so Claudius nodded in satisfaction. What are the mats stuffed with? He asked. Coarse wool stuffing. Mostly local, some imported from the city. We don't have a textile mill here yet, so all of our cloth comes from the cities, but we've got a sheep farm. Dominic explained. A wool mat wasn't anything impressive compared to a royal feather bed, but compared to a bear cot or a spot on the floor, it was a huge upgrade. Hard stretched canvas was the soldiers' basic sleeping arrangement, but the cots were not anyone's favorite, especially when it got cold overnight. Is this building heated? Claudius asked. It is. There is also running hot and cold water upstairs. The rooms don't have individual fireplaces, but there are large ones in the common areas. If you leave your door open all day, it will be fairly warm for the night. Though, if you trust your comrades, you can leave it open overnight and stay warmer. Dominic agreed. Did you want to see, your highness? We've cleaned for the morning, the officer suggested. Claudius nodded and followed the captain upstairs. There were a few officers sitting on pillows on the floor, gathered around a low table and playing cards. We didn't have sofas, Dominic explained with a shrug. The officers looked up and smiled at him. It's better this way anyhow. One man falls asleep on the couch and he blocks it all. But if he passes out at the table, he will just tip backward, and the rest of us can still play. Prince Claudius was more interested in the fireplace than the officer's relaxation time. Is that one of the units you will be selling from the factory? He asked. This is a custom item. The ones from the factory are made for a smaller, standard hearth. You could fit 2 of them in a fireplace this large. We thought that larger fake logs looked better with the size of the fireplace here, and it gives the soldiers more space to lay out wet gear. There are also thermal fans built into the fireplace there at the corners. When the fireplace is on, they blow hot air through the room. Technically, it was not a Magitech item, as there was no magic involved, just science. But they were becoming incredibly popular among the farmers. If you put one on an iron stove, the whole house would warm up in minutes. You could also point the fan toward another room, in case you wanted to heat a bedroom without lighting a fire in there. As most farmhouses were only 3 rooms, it was perfect. All right, I've seen what I need. No complaints from me about the convention center accommodations. Even if the Adventurers Guild takes it over after the meetings, it will still be a perfect spot for letting the out-of-town sorts stay. Claudius decided. That only left the manor, and when they made their way toward the walls, there was already a convoy of royal paladins and workers bringing crates inside. You really went all out, didn't you? Dominic joked. Claudius laughed. Some of those are gifts for the other princes, the rest is decorations for a royal suite for the duration of the meetings. Since Westover is being rebuilt as a central hub for international meetings, he thought that we should have a permanently established residence here. Building the additional courtyards with privacy and outdoor spaces was a brilliant engineering choice. We can claim one for the Signia crown without cramping the interior of the manor. Then, when any member of the royal family is visiting, they can be placed there without it being an insult to their status. Even if we're sharing, as long as there are enough rooms, protocol will consider it the same as an embassy or minor palace. No loss of status for multiple royals to be housed together. Dominic sighed dramatically. All good news. I wish that I could take responsibility for the decision, but most of it was the royals and the head of the infrastructure team. They've really gone all out on the improvements lately. We're beginning to feel like a small city already, and we're only just getting started. Dominic followed Claudius to the northeastern villa, where the staff were escorting all the incoming equipment. That was when Dominic realized that everyone had been placed in a specific order. Signia was on the northeast of the manor, while Mitfield was on the south, and Axbridge was northwest. They hadn't been placed to be evenly spaced, They were placed to represent the location of the city that they came from. Signia was actually due east of Westover, but the gate was east of the manor, so there were no villas on that side of the compound. Depending on how things went, that wouldn't last, as there were a lot of small nations to the northeast. But for this meeting, it was perfectly symbolic. If they met in the central garden, everyone would be walking toward their hometown when they finished the meeting. It was late in the night before the sounds of renovations inside the courtyard chosen as the royal residence finally stopped. Dominic was a bit scared to see how gaudy and overdone the interior would be, as the courtyard was not large, with the sleeping areas on the second floor, and the main floor being mostly an open social area with hidden bunks for a guard detachment along one wall. But they had spent half the day redecorating it. Fortunately, that meant both princes would be in the new unit starting now, which would move all of the actual business discussions out of the most traveled areas of the manor. It was more like having friendly neighbors than a house full of guests. Unfortunately for Dominic, he would not have time to enjoy the situation. There were caravans coming from both sides of the city, and the excited look on the face of the Duskblade sect elders said that they had more news for him this morning. If those convoys are who I expect them to be, then I won't have much time to talk today, so let's start with a recap. What have you got for me this morning? Dominic asked as breakfast was brought to the table. We have radios ready to place in the manors, and good news from the sawmill. They ran all night to cut boards for us, and our acolytes will be assisting the carpenters to get desks ready. Elder Manif explained. Now that is the best way to start the day. I believe that the office will be the best spot for it, and you can set up the antenna tower today. Dominic agreed. Alexis nodded in agreement. Both her and Castellan Julio worked in the office most of the time, but it was also well suited to station a maid in the room to listen for messages. Any spot they picked had to be somewhere that they could hear and record messages at any time of day, so the office was the best option. The only place that had staff in it for a larger percentage of the day was the kitchen, but it would be nearly impossible to hear a radio in there most of the time. Just the thought of trying to stop everything in the kitchen to listen to a faint signal was ridiculous. At least the office was usually quiet. What else do we have? Dominic asked. The scryers spotted a goblin tribe a few hours from town. We intended to send a team out after them later. Elder Manif added. Alexis smiled. I will take a few men and accompany them. I am certain that the mages will appreciate a few royal paladins. And Alexis appreciated the chance to get out of the house to kill goblins. She appreciated it a lot. Dominic ignored the way that she was already making plans and sending her royal guard to prepare for an overnight outing. He would be the one stuck at the manor today, likely with 2 different guild convoys to deal with. Not that he wasn't looking forward to them. Having the Adventurers Guild here would save them countless headaches in the future. And the merchants should be here to pick up the first shipment of Magitech fireplace inserts and lights. That would give them a much-needed influx of money to pay the workers their next month's wages, and to cover materials orders for the new buildings. If you will all excuse me, I have work to attend. Please, finish your meal. Dominic announced when the maids gestured that the convoys were close. Alexis gave him a kiss on the cheek, then a push toward the door. Don't wait up. We might make it an overnight trip to ensure that there are no other monster tribes too close to the town. She offered. I would expect no less. Talk to Beth before you leave. I'm sure she has something fresh for you. Then Dominic was out the door, pulling his boots on as he went. The soft shoes everyone wore around the house, or in the palace, were very comfortable, but terrible to work in, and Dominic knew that at some point today he would be helping load or unload cargo. Westover now had so many stone roads that you didn't really need to wear boots just to go out into the town anymore. But Dominic was so used to wearing them that he had never gotten to having more sturdy shoes made. The first caravan to arrive was going to be the Adventurers Guild convoy, and it was a big one. He had expected a handful of staff to work the new guild house, and the casino underneath it. But it looked like they had brought an entire company of ragtag mercenaries with them. And farmers? Yes, they had definitely brought farm equipment. They must have picked up some refugees to fill out the convoy for coin. That would make sense, as the Adventurers Guild often ran protection for convoys of all sorts. Dominic smiled as he remembered his first trip out of town, and the group of interesting characters that were in the caravan guards. Like the chain-smoking cleric that was driving the forge wagon, and Bella, the gunslinger. He scanned the caravan as he reminisced, then blinked as a familiar face popped out of a wagon window and waved at him. "Bella? Good morning," Dominic called, a smile creeping onto his face. Then, he saw a large head covered in freshly done braids appear behind her as was tried to see what his wife was waving at. "Blacksmith. Good timing. My sword is getting dull," the big warrior shouted. Dominic laughed. They must not know that he had been promoted. But what were they doing so far from home? Even if they took an escort mission, it would normally be to the capital and then back to Ermo's village, so they were only away from the farm for a few days or a week. If they took this round trip and went right back to the capital, they would still be gone nearly a month, with the usual stops of a caravan. The caravan came to a stop, and an older dwarf in ornate metal armor hopped down. "Duke Wistover, I presume?" he asked. "Indeed. It's a pleasure to meet you, Guild Master. I see that you brought a rather large contingent with you." Dominic agreed. The dwarf smiled. "Tactical relocation. You see, the taxes are high to rebuild after the war, and the war effort didn't pay well. Plenty of mercenary-minded families are looking for a fresh start after they auctioned their old homes for funding. Then there are the folks from Ermo's village. The village is expanding, and they bought out a bunch of farmers to build a suburb. There is some huge lout there who seems to know you, and convinced them all to come here." Dominic smiled. "I worked with him in the past, in my capacity as a traveling steamsmith. I was Pop's apprentice in Signia City, you see." The dwarf smiled. "I came here because he was here. No better place for me than a town with a proper dwarven smith. Looks like you've got a few in town, though." Dominic shook his head. "One smithy, one carriage shop, and a large magitech factory so far. Those are the smokestacks you're seeing." "You're not the old man's apprentice anymore?" the Adventurers Guild Master asked. Dominic shook his head and held out his arm, where he still had the skill core socketed into his arm guard. "I've reached journeyman and he took a new apprentice. She's an adorable one, a girl named Mead." The Guild Master smiled. "Oh, now that is a good name for a blacksmith. But we can catch up after I start getting everyone settled. Should I call the farmers out?" "Might as well. If you don't, Wiz and Bella are likely to run over here anyhow." "Too late." The Guild Master laughed as he saw the gunslinger running in their direction. "Dominic, did you come here for the tax-exempt restart too?" Bella called as she ran up to them. "Oh, you know the Guild Master? Perfect. We're going to have such a great time here. I brought the whole family, and Ermo's village paid us enough for the farm that I think we can get a good spot here too," she announced. Dominic winked at her. "You missed a few things while I was gone. Welcome to Wistover, my family's ancestral home. By the order of the king, I am Duke Wistover now, and I have married Princess Alexis." Bella froze. "Wait, back up. I missed a step in there somewhere. How did you go from traveling blacksmith's apprentice to Duke? And you married one of the Paladin twin princesses?" Dominic laughed. "I will explain it all later, but there is plenty of good farmland here. In fact, we're not even charging for it, we've just got some conditions. The base plots are 40 acres. Residency is contingent upon maintaining a home on it, and no family can claim more land than they can work. There are plenty of abandoned farmhouses left, though they're a bit further from the village itself. As you can see, we've got a lot of visiting military guests at the moment, but there is more than enough work for adventurers. With nobody living in the region for a decade, the roaming monster problem is everywhere. The only ones that aren't an issue are the trolls, who have their own village not far from here. We've got an agreement with them not to cause trouble for each other." Bella nodded slowly, taking in the information. "Well, I do hope that you can make time to explain it all, now that you've got so many responsibilities, Your Grace." She bowed, and Dominic laughed at her awkward courtesy. "Do all the farm families you brought have an adventurer with them?" Dominic asked, changing the topic. Both Bella and the Guild Master nodded, while the Guild Master took out a list of personnel. "Most of them have more than one. The only exceptions are the farmers from Ermo's, as Wiz and Bella are the only adventurers from that group. It averages out to more than one per family anyhow, as most of the ones who came from the Northeast have veteran soldiers who were adventurers before they were drafted. There are more than enough to serve as caravan guards, field patrols, and anything else that you might need. That is wonderful news. Many of our locals are trained hunters, and I've equipped them with Magitech rifles as a supplement to their usual bows. It makes them better able to deal with roaming monsters, though the silent bows are more popular for hunting still. Dominic explained. Bella's eyes sparkled with excitement at that news. So, you have more weapon recipes? Yes, but I'm not a full-time blacksmith anymore. I did spend some time as a gunsmith for the army during the war, though. So, if you're having issues with the pistol I made you, just let me know. I've also got some lower-grade mana revolvers available. I typically sell them to the Merchants Guild for their caravan guards. Dominic explained. Bella nodded. I heard, though I didn't realize that it was you. A gunslinger working as a caravan guard was the one who told us about the special status of Westover, and the good land to settle on, now that Eremos village bought out the old farm. We should put this off for later. Come up to the manor for dinner, and bring Wiz. Guildmaster, please join us as well. But first, I should explain the situation to the families, and show your guild hall staff to their new base of operations. It's currently serving as an officer's entertainment venue and event center, so it's not empty, but the office areas are unoccupied and ready for you to move in, as are the staff quarters. You may wish to stay in the village itself, and there are new houses available, but we put in a few apartments for the guild members in the building. Dominic explained. If he timed this right, they should have everyone scattered and looking for just the right farmstead before the Merchants Guild caravan arrived. Dominic watched as more families of adventurers disembarked, or had one member disembark to come greet him. Duke Westover, it is a pleasure to meet you. Did you have a map of the available farm plots? Do any of them have legacy buildings? One of the men asked. Everyone gather around. It's easier to just say this once. Dominic began. Most of the farm houses here remain intact and unlooted. You can spread either north or south of the river. It is all within the duchy, and there are houses on both sides. If you look a little, many of the farm houses will have a Magitech stove. That is obviously the prime choice if they are still intact. I have also instructed the farmers not to loot other houses. They were moving into fully stocked homes, in need of renovation. So, there should be dishware, furniture, and much more already in most of the houses. If you have your own, you can donate what you find to those in need. All that I ask is that you send someone back to town within the next 3 days to inform us of the plot that you have chosen, and that you do not try to claim more than you can work. We do have Magitech tractors here to assist with the tilling, but most of the fields have volunteer crops in them, and many of the gardens are intact. You will be best off to harvest what is there and prepare for the rainy season. It is possible to grow a second annual crop here, but the wet season is colder, and the harvest won't be as good, which means that the dry season crop is the more important of the two. He finished. The new arrivals waited through his customary speech with growing anticipation. Even if they had to fix an old farmhouse, it was better than nothing. It wasn't easy to bring everything with them on the trip, but none of them knew what they would find here when they arrived. So, they had packed everything they could, including some building materials that would be difficult to get locally. Much of that wouldn't be needed except to renovate, but it was still good to have it all. The new arrivals stopped to shake his hand on the way out, and then the vehicles began to spread out in different directions, with groups of families guessing what direction might hold the best farmland. Dominic noticed that the tractor pulling the trailers where Wiz and Bella's family were waving to him was a newly purchased one, still shiny at the fittings, where they would get dull after a year or two of exposure to the elements. But they had brought a fair bit of equipment, including the thresher that Dominic had repaired the last time he saw them, the one that the horse had kicked into submission. Half of the wagons were still stationary, arguing about what direction to go, as each tractor pulled a half-dozen families' worth of goods, and not all of them had the same idea on where they wanted to settle. But they all wanted to get there first. Unfortunately for Dominic, that was still the case when the Merchant Guild caravan arrived. Merchant. Excellent timing. The new arrivals were just about to head out and look for farms. Let me catch a ride with you, and we can head for the factory. Julio, can you help the Adventurers Guild master get settled? We still have prices to negotiate for the factory goods. Dominic noted. Julio bowed, but the guild master was already gone. He had taken off the moment that the farmers started to move, as he was eager to see his new guild house and the amenities that Dominic had promised. The trip to the factory was a short one, as the route had been designed to be easy to traverse with a trade caravan. But the look on the merchant's face when he saw that there were indoor loading and staging areas was worth the effort of riding over with him. If you send the empty wagons to the far side of the building, that's where the goods are staged today. Any of the others can pull inside at this end for repairs or inspection. We've got a fully stocked carriage maker, plus techno-wizards and steam fitters. Anything that your equipment is likely to need can be either made or sourced here. Dominic explained. The doors were rolled open, and the merchant clapped his hands to get everyone's attention before shouting orders to move. This is perfect. We've got a damaged wool spindle that we've been putting off for a few days now, as we didn't want to fabricate something on the side of the road. He explained. Even if it's a large repair, you're fine. We've got water storage tanks and a gantry crane that can lift a full-pressure vessel. So, if you need a bracket repaired or an axle swapped, it's not a problem. Dominic added. The carriage maker and his assistants rushed over as the merchants pulled into the bays. They got the repair list from the drivers and brought it to the boss for approval, as he would be the one paying, and they didn't want to do anything he hadn't approved. That's all fine by me. It's better to do it here than to wait again. With Castle City in such a mess, we don't want to get repairs there, and that means Darden or Skypington at the earliest. It might even be the capital before we find another shop that can get us in immediately. He agreed. The carriage maker nodded along in agreement. The worse that the backlog and mess in the other cities got, the better it was for him. They might be in the middle of nowhere, but that was where parts always broke. Fixing tractors kept them going, and they could sell a few new builds to the farmers. But a nice long list of maintenance items on a merchant caravan was a never-ending supply of well-paying rush work. While they work, let's go look at the goods. I showed the last caravan the prototype, but we hadn't worked out a price for the final product. We've altered the Magitech lights a little as well. The originals were made for household ceiling mount, but the new design will also work well for pole or carriage mount. Dominic explained. The merchant picked one up and examined it, then turned it on and off a few times. That's nice. The design is sturdy enough for outdoor use, even though the panels are glass. It doesn't put off heat like the kerosene lamps, so it should be safer while hanging in the same spots. I like it. We can sell these nearly anywhere. Now, let's see the fireplace inserts. Dominic took one out with a professional nod. We made them to the 45-centimeter firewood length standard, designed as a 3-log stack, which will fit nearly any fireplace and most wood stoves as well. The logs are glazed clay, with the Magitech orb set into them in a way that is encased for durability, but marked for removal without destroying the piece should the Magitech orb fail. The merchant took the fireplace insert from Dominic and turned it in his hands, examining it for quality and craftsmanship before setting it on the ground and activating it. Nice even flame, temperature adjustment is smooth, mana requirement is low. Yes, these are an excellent product. Mass-produced quality, but better than expected for mass production. How many experienced glaziers do you have in the factory? Dominic shook his head. Only 2. A journeyman and an apprentice. We didn't have a master potter or glazier available, but we made do with what we did have. I believe that the quality speaks for itself. It wouldn't be embarrassing to have them even in the manor. The merchant nodded. They looked enough like logs that they would pass anywhere, and nobody expected the inside of a fireplace to be fancy. Perhaps in the Duke's manor, the fake fireplace might be examined with more intense scrutiny, but for the people who would be looking to buy these, it was much more important that they were easy to use, and that a manageable amount of mana would keep them active for the night during the winter. How is the duration? He asked. 12 hours at medium settings. 24 hours at a slow burn. The merchant's smile spread slowly into a toothy grin. Now we're talking. If it can keep the room warm all night without intervention, it will be the most popular item in my next shipment. Dominic laughed and gestured to the wall. Come over here. There is one at low output inside the stove now. We leave it running all the time to make coffee in the break area. The factory is all stone, so it's rather cool in here most of the time, and nobody minds the heat. Dominic explained. They would likely turn it off in the middle of the dry season, when not even the thick stone of the building could compensate for the stifling heat outside. But this time of year it only made the break room a bit more comfortable. Inside an enclosed metal stove, it didn't take much heat to keep the coffee water at drinking temperature, and some thoughtful techno-wizard had even put a thermostat on the top, so they knew if the vents needed to be opened or closed to keep the coffee perfect. Is it just me? Or is the coffee maker more technologically advanced than most of the factory? The merchant asked. Priorities. But you're not wrong. The mechanical setup in the factory is brilliant and durable, but also time-tested designs, not cutting-edge technology. It's better that way because we know that even if the master smith who made most of the equipment is not available, we should be able to find someone who can fix it and not lose time. Dominic explained. Oh? I had thought that you would be going for efficiency or some new production method. Dominic shook his head. The new method is training workers in the basics of Magitech engineering. That's not something that anyone has done before that I know of. A highly educated and magic-using workforce isn't common for a factory, but they're all looking forward to getting a good price for their work. The merchant chuckled and handed Dominic a piece of paper with a set of numbers written on it. That's acceptable, but I was hoping that the quantity you would take would be a bit higher. Dominic replied. The merchant frowned as he looked at the stack of produced goods. I can take more next trip, if this one sells well. He reluctantly agreed. This was an expensive purchase, and if they had both misjudged the market, he would be in a tight spot, taking even 2 wagons worth of them. They shook hands, and Dominic accepted a large bag full of gold coins. The factory workers cheered as they realized that the first deal was done, and the goods were nearly loaded. But the caravan wouldn't be leaving so fast. They had repairs to be made, and some of them would take a few hours. If you would like, there is a break room to relax in, or the inn is a few blocks down on your left. Dominic offered. I think that a bite of lunch and a cold ale are in order. They do have cold drinks, right? Dominic laughed. There are Magitech refrigerators in the inn. The drinks are as cold as you're likely to find, and not just cellar-chilled. Now we're talking. I will leave you to your duties, Lord Westover. Once my men have finished the loading, I will retire to the inn for the afternoon to wait on repairs. You won't be thirsty long. We've used the cranes to load the crates on pallets. They're almost done already. Dominic noted. The merchant stared at the process with a hint of awe. Now that is efficient. One man to load it all and no worries about dropped crates. Are those stacked to the dimensions of a cargo trailer? As long as you're using the standard bed dimensions, which I assume you are, or they would have hand-loaded them. It should give you a little room around the edges to grab the boxes, but not enough that anything can tip. We put a lot of effort into planning the most efficient way to load them. We even ordered nets, in case someone showed up with an open deck and insufficient rope. Dominic agreed. Anything to make sure that the deal goes through, right? Exactly. Plus, the river troll gets mad if we use the nets for fishing.